halaches that there's this concept of what we call the parsa, or the curtain, which separates between different dimensions of holiness. Particularly, we found that there were 13 curtains in the Beis Hamikdash, and they all served this same concept. We said that at nighttime, the gates of the Beis Hamikdash were locked, and in the daytime they were open, but there was curtains for Tznias, Rashi says. And so we said that this whole concept of the Beis Hamikdash, locking the doors, opening the doors, having curtains on the doors, not only that, but the whole blueprints of the Beis Hamikdash, and not even the Beis Hamikdash, but even the Harabais and the whole Yerushalayim, it's all mechuvan keneged the Yerushalayim shel Maila, right? So everything that's happening over there, we are modeling the higher worlds. And so the idea of night and day, what's that?
Specifically Malchus of Atzilus?
Specifically Malchus of Atzilus.
They were creating the reality up there.
What's that?
They were creating the reality up there.
They were
Mimicking.
also creating it, but also mimicking it. It's like kind of like a mirror.
Are they creating and mimicking it?
Both?
Well,
Or is
it's a
that
good question, really.
What is it?
It's a crazy question, regardless.
Yeah.
All depends how
That's-
you look on it, really.
That's like the machloket between the Rambam and the Ramban about languages.
Okay.
Maybe.
That's a good question. There is the concept of you're actually here for the answer. Okay, so it says, you have to da shekol malamayla mimach, right? Da malamayla mimach. You have to know what's above you. But then the Maggid of Mezrich says you have to know what's above is mimach, is from you. Is that we create all the hamshachas and bring things down. But I mean, as far as the actual structure of the thing, is that we have the reason we can bring things down is because we're modeling the structure up there and opening the right vessels in order to enable it to flow down. So I think it's a little bit of both. In other words, because we exist in a couple places at once, right? We exist in our source, and then we sort of go through the shviras hakelim with everybody else, and we fall down here, and then we have to reassemble ourselves to look like our source. So ultimately, I think it comes from us, but at the same time, we're still drawing it down from our own selves as we are up there. Does that make sense? Or it doesn't have to make sense, I guess, if we're done asking questions. All right, so anyway, there's a concept of day and night in the Beis Hamikdash. And this day and night has to do with whether or not there's a strong hashpa from Malchus of Atzilus coming into the lower world. That's called day. And night is when there's a histalkus of the or, that the light ceases to come down. And even when it ceases to come down, it still comes down in a minimal way. Like we quoted from Eishes Chayil, Titen Teref Lebeisa, V'takam B'yod Laila, V'titen Teref Lebeisa. She gets up in the middle of the night and she gives food to her house. So obviously there's still some flow of energy into the worlds, even at night, even when the gates are closed, but it's tremendously minimized. And even during the day, when the gates are open, there's still this thing called the curtain for Tznias. And that's what we're trying to understand a little bit more about. I think as far as a review, that's pretty much as far as we got. Sound familiar? For those who were here? Okay.
You talked about that digestion too.
Oh, right.
Right,
Thank
the
you.
minimal, the teeth and the
Right.
Takabir Lela is like a minimal. It's like enough life to just keep things going, but not for things to really, to be moving around and.
Right. So we said it's like sleep. Right? So when a person, in other words, how much life do you get from your soul when you're sleeping? It's a similar amount of life that the worlds get from Hashem at night, or when the Beis Hamikdash is closed. And the idea is that when you're sleeping, what we call your panemius powers, your intellect, your emotions, your vision, your hearing, all the things that are sort of, your active inner, stronger powers, they go into a state of histalkus. In other words, they're not expanded, they're not expressed into your body. You lose them. It's because they collect themselves into your heart, is what he says here, right? But even though that's a tremendous tzimtzum and negation of light, something good happens that you would never see. which is that it pulls out the ability for your other lesser, sophisticated functions to work, like your digestion, for example. And so we said actually you digest much better at night, and the whole process of what it means to go to sleep, all the kinds of healing properties that are active in the body at night, we said even in intellectual functions, chitzonius parts even of the mind come out at night. And I would imagine they use the same type of sort of cleaning process, just like the body handles all of the excess minerals and food that's in it at night and like puts everything where it needs to go. The same thing happens with your sort of mental state. That's what we say, when you wake up in the morning, you understand ideas that you didn't fully grasp when you went to bed. Because there's like the sort of bottom, what do they call the bottom of the ocean? They have those bottom feeders. They're sort of just cleaning up the shop, taking care of things that when you're awake, those forces don't get to operate because they're swallowed up and negated inside of the more powerful forces. So it turns out that nighttime, even though it's a big tzimtzum, something very positive happens, that it reveals the chitzonius, right? But you would not be able to be seen otherwise. Okay. So we'll take it from, the line starts, Ubayom Niftachim Tari de Gan Eden, which is about 12, 15 lines from the bottom, the first column. You see that? Ubayom. Yeah. You got it? So it says, in the day, the gates of Gan Eden are open. Because in the daytime, again, day and night is also chesed and gevura. So the day represents a sort of abundance of chasadim, of chesed, as it says, chesed keil kol hayom. And we see that chesed is dafka connected with the daytime, chesed, which is also the name keil, kol hayom, it shines during the day. Right, which just literally means God's kindness is all day long, but you could see that if there's a code written into the Torah, it said that chesed is connected with kol hayom, the concept of what happens in the daytime. There's abundance of, how you doing? The abundance of light, of day. Yeah. Al kein nimshach az hamshacha hapenimis. That's why at that time there's a hamshacha penimis. In other words, all the deeper, stronger ray of the Shechina comes down and feeds Gan Eden, because that's what chasadim is, right? What is chesed? It's an expansion, right? It's like an unending giving, as opposed to gevurah, which is a taking. So, therefore, in the daytime, suddenly all the light comes out and shines. Afal pikein yesh bechinas paroches. But even while you have all this expansion, it's not a total expansion bli gevul mamish, because if it were, it would be too much light for the worlds to handle, right? A full expansion of Hashem's chesed means that it's unending Or Ein Sof, to the point that nothing. What do you have when you have Or Ein Sof? You have nothing else, right? You only have Or Ein Sof. So therefore, in order to negate that problem that there's too much light, and therefore these subtle, hidden inner dimensions which are existing in that light but which can't be expressed when the light is shining, they require a parsa, right? There has to be a curtain shining in front of that light, so as to not let all the chesed out, so that it wouldn't not nullify all the would-be existence. So all this chesed comes out through the middleman of this curtain. The parsa him bechinas Hashmal. Okay, so now we're getting to the big one here. So the parsa represents what we call the Hashmal. Right? In modern Hebrew, it's electricity.
But
I love it when you do that.
energy or
Didn't the Rabbi
is that honest or sarcasm?
Anyway, the Hashmal means electricity in Hebrew, but it really comes from the vision of the chariot, right? We read in Sukkot, and we read not in Sukkot, in Shavuos, and we read on Matan Torah that there was a vision of the chariot and all kinds of explanations of a man sitting on a chariot and the angels around him and a description of them, and it says there was a Hashmal, right, that surrounded them. That's where they got the word. There wasn't no word for electricity in ancient Hebrew, so they picked up a nice little Kabbalistic theme over there. But the Hashmal is a very deep thing? What is it supposed to be representing?
Well, like certain levels of godliness are hidden within the light, or obscured through the light.
Right. In other words, put it like this. Yud K Vav K, for example, right? We call that the infinite light. Because it's Haya Hoveh V'Yihye, it's past, present, and future all at once, which the word itself, Yud K Vav K, is like a linguistic composite of 3 Hebrew words, which means past, present, and future. To he was, he is, and he will be all at once. So we call that the infinite light because experiencing all things at once is basically nullifies the individuality of anything. It becomes a null, like basically any finite entity becomes a nullity, and you just have one thing called infinite light. But you can see that inside of that infinite light, the name itself, Yud Kei Vav Kei, it has 4 letters, right? And 4 letters, each one is very distinct from the other, and each one represents a whole, we know, a world, a certain gathering of spheros, right? Individual man, animal, plant, inanimate, right? So all those parts are actually sitting inside of the Yud Kei Vav Kei, but when the Yud Kei Vav Kei is all together, and all like the matter turns into energy, you can't make out any of the individual matter, but it is in there. But that's the problem. We want to see what's inside of there, but when it's all as one, we can't make it out. And so therefore the nighttime, so to speak, the tzimtzum, or even the daytime actually, there's this curtain, right? The nighttime is a tremendous tzimtzum. The nighttime brings out, things that cannot even be seen when the curtain is out, right? The gates are locked, or the gates are closed and locked. That's a whole other level of blocking the light and allowing very chitzonius dika aspects to come and be seen of it, right? But if the light is merely blocked for tznias, so then you're blocking the etzem of the light, but you're allowing other aspects of the light to shine through. As opposed to if it's all kol chesed kol hayom, excuse me, right? If chesed is just shining the full brightness, then all the individual parts are not, they're in there in a way that they cannot be seen at all. They're batul b'metzias. So the whole concept of tzimtzum is to bring out, in other words, filling in with our previous model, past, present, and future as 3 different things, right? Then you can make sense of it. If the future is over there at its place, and it doesn't interfere with my understanding of the present, and the past is in its place, and it doesn't interfere with my understanding of the present, so then I can start to make out, unique aspects called, for example, time, right? Once you're living in time, you can have one moment of time at a time, in which case you can experience it, right? If all of time is happening simultaneously, you can't experience any of it. You're like sort of in it, as opposed to sort of grasping it and having a hold on it. Does it make sense? Not really?
To an extent, it doesn't. If it completely made sense, what would you consider?
Yeah, I hear you there. Okay, let's go on.
Sorry.
Yeah.
The connection with Lech Lecha?
I mentioned it a little bit yesterday. Just from Avram to Avraham, right? It's basically bringing out different levels of chokhmah and lowering it into this world. So this is also the idea of enabling other light to be seen that couldn't be seen in this world. It's not 100% stated clearly here. It just happens to be a continuation from the Maimer before. But this Maimer is not about Lech Lecha per se. The reason why it's in this parsha of Lech Lecha is because it's a continuation. The Chassidus of it is a continuation of the theme of the last parsha. So to really answer that question, we really have to learn the previous Maimer. But I felt that this was the right call. Anyway, so where are we? So in order to make it so there's not this sort of slate of light which has no distinguishing factors, there is the paroches. There's what's called the parsa, the curtain. The nimshach hamshach hazu adem tzutza parsa. Right? This flow comes out through a curtain. The parsa is the Hashmal. So what is this Hashmal? So he's saying this gets a little bit fancy with the language, but he fully elucidates himself and clarifies. Just hang in there. But he says this has come from Chitzonius Habina. Shemalbish umakif as a yud spheres de Zah. Okay, there's your statement. It comes from the Hashmal, which is the parsa. Okay, this curtain in Kabbalistic language is called a Hashmal, right? Which I'm not going to try and translate really,
For the parsa.
but we're translating it as this curtain. Parsa means a curtain.
Okay.
Okay, which is again symbolized, and we can visualize as the curtains that covered the gates of the Beis Hamikdash during the daytime. That even when the gates were open, there was curtains that covered them over. So we're saying this is some kind of a blocking, so you're not able to see the lights coming out of the Beis Hamikdash directly. There's a curtain blocking them, and this is called in Kabbalistic language the Hashmal.
Wait, how is that distinct from the parchas?
It's the same.
It's the same thing. Okay.
The parsa is is a translation of paruchas. So, what is it in Spheros? In other words, what is this mechanism that enables the minimization of the light to flow out of Malchus into the worlds? So he says it comes from Chitzonius Habina, right? So Bina is a few spheres up above Malchus. You're familiar with the Tree of Life diagram a little bit?
A little bit.
Okay, so we're talking about Bina here, and not Bina itself, but the Chitzonius of Bina. In other words, the most external aspects of Bina.
In Atzilus still, or
Yeah, we're in Atzilus.
is there a Chitzonius and a Panemius of all the spheres, or just in Atzilus? Or something?
No, yes, there definitely is. There's not only Chitzonius and Panemius, in general there's even Rosh Toch Sof. There's the top, middle, and end. In other words, and these are basically to visualize it, it's like the three levels of any vessel. There's the part which is inside touching the liquid. There's the actual body of the vessel itself, and then there's the aspect that you're grasping it. In other words, that it can have access to the outside. The outside of the vessel you pick up. So all the spheros are called kelim because a kli has to have these three elements to it.
And does depending on that element, it has a different relationship with the other spheres also? Chitzonius, like with the outside world, that would make sense. But like with the other,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
In other words,
the light is like the liquid in here, right?
yep, the light is the liquid. In other words, there's aspects of the kli that has nothing to do with the outside world. They don't get involved in the zula, so we call it the other, right? Their whole business is to be clinging to the liquid, the light. And then there's an intermediary which allows them to then have access to. So in other words, in terms of if you want to understand what that would look like, I was reading in a tremendous mimer last night, and it's very much talking about this. He's saying that when the vessels of Atzilus in general, what they do is they take the light and they make it so that it's there's a big difference between the vessels of Atzilus and all the other vessels that come in the lower worlds.
Right.
And that is that the vessels of Atzilus, as it were, they reveal as opposed to conceal. Other vessels are like clothing that you put around the body and it hides the thing that's inside. The vessels of Atzilus are like the body itself.
Because the first wave, the first.
The body itself is a vessel which reveals the soul. In other words, the function of the body is not to cover up and conceal the soul. The function of the body is so that you can have access to the soul in this world. The soul has a place to show itself, right? It doesn't necessarily show itself as pure soul, right? The vessel affects it and makes the soul be seen through physical, characteristics. But when you're looking at a person's body, it's like a window to the soul. You're seeing, and if you didn't have a body, their soul would have no opening in this world to show itself. So the function of the body is to reveal, not to conceal. So you have vessels which reveal and vessels which conceal. You follow me?
Yeah.
So, but even the vessels that reveal, which is basically the body, therefore, is a metaphor for the 10 spheres of Atzilus. This is what they are. They're different than the other spheros and kelim that come after them, because Atzilus is there in order to show us what the Or Ein Sof is, not to hide it.
Right.
Because otherwise there would be no way for the Or Ein Sof to express itself.
Right.
Nonetheless, so we just established that these vessels reveal, but certainly these vessels, in general, vessels conceal, right? And the idea is, what do they conceal and what do they reveal? It depends what you're talking about. They conceal the infinite light that is completely not relevant to being seen. So while the light comes into the body, it's simultaneously doing two things. It's blocking out light which is completely beyond revelation to this world.
Right.
And therefore it's at the same time highlighting and showing and revealing light which can be seen and can be shown to this world. Much like what we just said about digestion. Right? When you're sleeping, a similar thing happens. Like the sleep aspect blocks out your intellect, your emotions, your like sort of awake self. But at the same time as blocking that out, the very sleep is also revealing other powers that would not have been seen otherwise, because they get sort of lost in when the real big light is shining. And that's your powers of digestion and so forth. So to your point though, like the fact that a soul has the power of vision, therefore, according to what we're saying, it has that power of vision before it comes into the vessels. It's just that it didn't. It's essential power of vision, which is a power of vision which is not relevant to being seen. And when you understand, because all the vessels, the physical eye, for example, when your soul's power of sight comes to the physical eye, it blocks out all types of the whole realm of sight, which is beyond revealing itself, and it shows only the element of sight which can be revealed. And therefore, all of a sudden, you can see through your eye. If you think about it, I was just kind of mind blown last night, just thinking about some basic things that we talk about every day, but when you put a little spin on it, it changes the matter. How can you see, right? In other words, you have an eye, physical eye, that basically captures a very incredible spiritual power, and you have just eyesight, you take it for granted, but it's a totally mystical thing. I mean, it's not like something that you can really describe what it is or anything. Intellect, you're just like a conscious being going. How are you such a conscious being with having thoughts? Because you have a physical piece of brain, right? And it's literally, this is really the kicker. You have emotions. How do you feel love and fear? It's because you have a heart. We do not like really process this. We don't. I mean, maybe you guys do, but thinking about this is really a crazy concept. This like beating piece of flesh inside of my body is actually responsible in a very real way. There's no other way around it. Like that's what makes me have the experience of love and fear. You don't think of it usually as relating to the physical aspects of your body. That's why people are so, disconnected from their body, basically. Because they don't realize that their whole spiritual self is actually only able to be experienced because there's a vessel which reveals. In other words, it's a physical thing which allows spiritual light to shine through it. So all of a sudden you can see, all of a sudden you can feel, all of a sudden you can think. Whereas before you came into this body, you could do all those things, but not in the way that you could feel and think, so to speak. Or put it like this, let's take the visual one, the eye. You couldn't see the concept of the other. Think about this. You had sight, but the sight was in a different dimension where you could not, there was no concept of the other. Up in their essence, there's no two things. So even though you had sight, it was a completely different sight where it wasn't that you're seeing something outside of yourself, or you're feeling something outside of yourself, or you're having a relationship, all your intellectual powers are with something outside of themselves. So that level of the intellect, which is relatively a very low Tznias level of the intellect, was not even available to be experienced. And it's pretty good, the concept of seeing something else. What does it even mean to just see when there's no other thing? It's like some kind of a grand visual insight, but there's no two yet. So your power of sight is seeing the other. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Only when it comes into the body. And then what do we say when that happens? When it comes to the vessels block out all the things which are not relevant to the other, and they highlight and reveal all the powers which are relevant to the other, and suddenly you have all these powers in your body. Right? So
Is that why
Yeah.
this is all about Asay instead of just Surmei
I didn't hear you. All about Asay
It's not
Tov.
about Surmei necessarily only because that would be like bettering our bodies, but this is channeling it to use it for potential because of how fascinating and how much potential it has.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying there. I can see what you're
So
saying there.
I'm just channeling it into the right areas.
I can see what you're saying there. Yeah.
So would you say what we see and everything we experience in waking life is only a sort of projection of what our soul wants to experience within this world?
That's taking it to the next step there. I would not disagree with that. I would not disagree with that.
So everything happens to us for a reason. So whatever, you understand the idea.
Yeah. No, it's true. There's a lot of ramifications that come from thinking about this idea. I mean, before we make sort of conjectures about I'd rather read it inside and then let them tell me what the ramifications are. But you're right. I see what you're saying. In other words, ultimately, what he's saying is that there is no such thing as the other in reality, because your power of sight only comes into contact with the other when most of it is removed. Right? In other words, when you're not seeing the whole true concept of who you are, only then do your powers sort of express themselves as dealing with some outside world. So if in truth, the whole dealing with the outside world is just like a hint of what it really means, just that you're dealing with yourself. You're trying to understand your own powers. And the whole world around you is basically not really there. In other words, it's just there as like sort of a mirror so you can understand what you actually have inside of you. That's what it says. What you see in other people is really found in yourself. And what's more, according to what we said in the beginning of the class, Kol mad l'mayla mimach, everything that's above or even outside of you, everything is from you. Because essentially there is only one thing. And the fact that you're having all these experiencing, projecting your midos, it's just so you can see them, see what they are, but it's not necessarily, if you fix yourself, you automatically fix the world. Anyway, means external, lower, like the outside of the vessel, that would be the Tznias. And again, the outside of the vessel is the only part that's relevant to the other. So the inside of the vessel, it's an aspect of your powers which does not, it's vision that's not seeing something else. It's just intrinsic vision, right? Because it's the inside, so to speak. It's not related to the outside, which has a connection with something other than you. Or here it engenders the whole concept of other. Yeah.
This does beg the question of our knowledge of the ultimate other, Hashem.
Why is that the ultimate other?
Because it's the only, to say that everything and all of creation is one is not such a great leap. But it was created. If there's at no point any separateness from Hashem, then there's to some extent the denial of creation. There needs to have been some separation. When we say Lech Lecha, okay, but it's still created, and it's still not Him. So there is a level when you're coming to this level of consciousness that everything you see in the other, you're recognizing as a oneness that's you, where you have to stop when you think that, before you think I am God. That thought still would be incorrect. It's true on some level, sure, but it's still not exactly what it is. There is something that was created here.
There's no Ani Hashem lo shanisi. The whole Hasidus is basically coming to I would say address and answer this seeming feeling of separateness that we have. In other words, no, we do not accept the Bria, so to speak, as something which hinders in any way Hashem's achdus and simple unity. Right? So okay.
He includes us even
so you're wondering, no, even after He creates. That's what Misha Nivra Olam, right? Even after the creation, even before. Okay, so that's your answer right there. That even before, so to speak, creation, the roots of creation existed. In other words, even before there was something called vision that was relevant to the outside world, which is where creation is relevant, there's vision which has nothing to do with the outside world. The powers, so to speak, are one with Hashem. And so when you finally see the powers delineated as individuals, it's not because there's actually a separation of the unity. It's because Hashem is trying to show you who He is. In other words, what.
So when we say in the beginning God created heaven and earth, that
right.
translates as I tricked myself into thinking that I exist so that I could observe myself from a very small vantage point. But really I'm God and I don't exist.
When you say I'm God, it's not that necessarily you're the totality of God, but you're nothing other than God, right? You're not something other than God. But you can't say that you're the totality of God per se, even though in a certain sense that there is an aspect that the totality of God is inside of you. But you don't want to trip into like kind of idolatrous concepts. But the truth is that there's nothing other to you than what you have than God. There's not something else.
There doesn't need to be some sort of gate there, though. So then when you're thinking about God, you're thinking about what?
Right. So we're saying, what is the gate? It's this. This is exactly what we're talking about. It's this curtain, right? Which what it does is it doesn't change the fact that what comes out on the other side of the curtain is light. It's just that it filters the light so you can see what's inside, what's making up the light. Now, when it's inside the light, all the things that are making up the light do not make Hashem into a composite being. And that's important. That's the only important point that we really need to focus on in this conversation, because there is the whole creation before He created it inside of Him, but that doesn't mean that He's made up a bunch of parts. And the reason is for the whole what we've been saying. The reason is because of what we've been saying, that the way that those parts are existing, the way they are up there, are in a way that's so non-understandable to the way that they are out here, to the point that we understand sight as something having to do with the outside inside. But the reality of sight has nothing to do with there being an other. Right? So these parts, so to speak, these 248 parts that we have, which are also inside of the source, they don't make Him an entity made up of parts. That's the beauty of them. It's they don't divide anything. It's like, that's why they call them light and vessel, right? Light, you can have all the different colors of the rainbow inside of light. It doesn't make it more than one thing. Whereas vessel, it actually removes, the yellow goes into the yellow, the green goes into the green. There's like the concept of vessels makes things be separate. But in light, you can have all, inside of white light, you have all those colors, but they don't make any mess. They don't make any division. It's all one. So same thing is true with the Bria. The Bria inside of Hashem does not negate or contradict in any way His simple unity, which is very hard for human beings to understand because we're on the other side of the curtain. And then what the curtain does is it delineates all the would-be parts, which and at their pristine level over there, it's the word parts is really not the right word. But when the curtain gets covered over it, then He delineates the parts mamish. So all of a sudden we think that there's a real bria and there's separation, but it's not true. All He's doing is sort of giving us, He's actually what He's removing from us. He's not making something, which is what people think. He made something. It's the opposite. He's taking something away, right? And He doesn't even really take it away. He just hides it. And what He's taking away is that overriding light, which makes a negation out of all parts, which is still there after He makes the creation. We just can't see it. That's what it means to be on this side of the curtain. But the one positive thing, as we're saying, there's good things come out at night too, like digestion, or the ability to perceive the other. In other words, there's a kind of a powers that we are seeing that it's not just just like a symbolic ability for us to have a little piece of the game over here. By His concealing the ultimate oneness, He actually shows us the real sweetness and the multiplicity of things that are going on in that oneness, but nonetheless do not negate it being one. You follow what I'm saying?
Can I pose the ocean metaphor to help with the drops of water from the ocean, from the oneness of the ocean? When the drops of water, when the clouds form and it rains, that we are the drops of water that go into the ground is no different than the ocean. It's not a different essence. It's the same water of the ocean, but when it's in the ocean, it's the oneness, it's the totality versus the individual drops. You can't see the individual drops when they're in the ocean. It's just the ocean. Right? But the individual drops, when they go up and they come down and they land on the ground, and then a tree grows from a little drop. But this is all happening, and then it eventually comes back into the ocean. The totality of the ocean is not lost, and the drops of rain are no different.
Is that with the souls?
What's that?
When you say
With
souls,
the souls?
Yeah.
when you say souls of Israel, that implies that there's multiple souls within a collective soul, correct?
Well, that's kind of getting right to this point. Yes and no. Because when we come out, we become a multiplicity. But when we're inside the ocean, to his analogy, there's no drops of water in there anymore.
It's just
one ocean.
It's just the ocean.
Now, there are drops of water in there. But in the way that this comes out, actually, don't even look at it as drops of water. There's even sand particles in there. But you only get to see the sand particles when the waves recede into the ocean. And that's why it says in Chassidus, you have sand is the most, individuated aspect of earth that you can find. Whereas if you go deeper into the land, the earth is all in clumps. When you go right next to the sea, because the ocean pulls away, this is like the concept of the tzimtzum. The Alter Rebbe brings this analogy. When the water removes itself, you're left with everything in its most individuated state. That the earth has no water left into it to sort of clump it together, and every single molecule of it is separate than the other sand grain. Because this is what happens when you remove the water. All of a sudden the sand which was in the water, basically, it shows itself as
There's a lot
as
more
sand.
to God than what He reveals in creation. All of these parts, even if we do imagine that it's not a sum of its parts and all of that, there's still a lot more. I mean, it's all just some thing that's coming out.
It's true, but in other words, the way that it's expressed is like this. You have a word. Let's say they always take the word Baruch, right? And if you have Baruch, what you have is more than just 4 letters, right? You have a concept, blessed or drawn down. So inside of that, and really Baruch is just the first word of a bigger sentence, Baruch Sha'amar B'Haya Olam, right? So you have blessed is the one who spoke and came into creation. It's all in this word Baruch, this whole concept. But when you're reading the word Baruch, you don't even make out the letters anymore. They have these things that you can see where they changed all the letters in between the word, and you can still read the sentence. Have you seen these kind of things? What's that all about? That's a very Hasidic concept. It's showing you that when the concept inside the words is Bahadgasha is present, the letters become completely immaterial. You can basically read it without even having the right letters there completely, because you're in grasp of the higher concept which is in them. So what happens is, this is how the letters represent the individuated parts of reality. Our soul powers the multiplicity dimension of godliness. When the concept is shining in them in full, the letters completely disappear. You're no longer in possession of any letters. All you have is light. Because those letters, which even though those letters are actually holding the light, but the light is so overwhelmingly powerful that the letters become, you don't need the letters anymore. The letters are just there to show something. The thing is revealed. So the letters become nullified. Right? But
They're almost the vessel.
the letters are the
The
vessel.
vessel.
But at this particular junction of the vessel, there's the vessel. We think of vessels as something which contains something inside of it.
The light
But
shines
this
through
is
the
the other way around. The vessels in this case are contained inside of the light. And that's like in the analogy, the idea is shining for you. When you're really meditating on an idea which you got off the page from letters, when you take it home and you start to meditate, you don't use letters anymore. It's like a vision. And the letters are they're in there, but they're sunk. That's what the word teva means. It's like sunk inside. You don't see it anymore. Then what happens? The great tzimtzum, right? And the great tzimtzum. Let me just finish this quick analogy, and we'll get to questions. Your translations I can do.
Contraction.
Yeah, the great contraction, which means the light decides to leave. You lose the concept, and what are you left with? A bunch of letters, right? And the letters, without the light in them, they start to dissipate one from the other. They start to separate. So now you have a base on this wall, a resh on that wall, a vav over here somewhere. And guess what? When the letters are separated, you completely lose even the ability to regain that light and that concept that they have the potential to hold. They're no longer holding it because they're not together anymore. And this is what we call the shattering of the vessels. And that's what you're looking at, right? A world of brokenness where you don't see how it all fits together. And so the Jewish mission is to go and basically reconnect all the letters, align them according to the great name of Hashem, which is the Torah, and rebuild the Beis HaMikdash, which is basically rebuilding, this word, which if you take all the elements, all the letters and all of reality, and you put them and you spell them in the right way, it'll spell the kingdom of God on earth. So we can do that. And we've been doing that. But here's the problem. Even when you're going to respell the word, as you're respelling it, you don't necessarily right away link into the full vision of the message that's in there so fast. In other words, that's what Mashiach is. When we'll finally put the whole thing back together again, then the unity of Hashem will have made a vessel for it, so that the unity of Hashem can actually shine through and negate once again all the feeling of separateness. But in the meantime, we're sort of in the midst of that process. We're fixing it, we're putting the letters together, so what's paramount to our eyes is still the letters. But what's Kedusha is when you can make a little base medrash, or you make a little Beit Knesset, and you have a bunch of Yidden sitting around learning Chassidus and talking about God in the morning. You make like pockets of a perfect world where godliness can shine through those letters, right? And ultimately, it'll fill the whole world. So it's really just a matter of perspective, whether you're able to see the light inside of the letters, or whether you don't see the light at all and you only see letters, or whether you only see light, right? And so this is the idea. That was a good question there. All right, let's go on here. I don't know where we wound up, but
Can I ask one more?
that's going to pretty much bring us right to the end of the class, I think. Okay, go ahead.
Then don't answer, but does Torah and mitzvahs, does it add to creation, in other words, add to the separateness, or does it add to the...
No.
Does it add to the unity, in other words,
it's-
undo creation?
It doesn't undo creation, nor does it add to the separateness. It reorganizes the separateness into its original oneness. What is the Torah mitzvah? You're making new matter in the world? No, you're taking the existing matter and you're putting it into the design and the rules of that the Creator destined.
How is that different from just going back to what it was before?
Because the difference, that's a great question, because the difference of going back to what it was before was that the vessels never surfaced. So it's like, for example, someone who has like a vision of an idea, but he can't really explain it to anyone because he hasn't even really explained it to himself. Like there's something which is causing him to have all this revelation, but he doesn't know, so to speak. No, but it was not in a state. In other words, it's very interesting how we see the state of the world according to the Kabbalists when it first comes out. It says in the beginning of creation, it was Hu Ushmo Bilvad. Hashem was filling all the space, and it was only Him and His name alone. In other words, we start off the process where it says that there was infinite light filling whatever would be the potential space. In other words, the vision of the vessels was not revealed in the beginning of creation. Yes, the potential vessels were there, but this is what Hashem did. He removed the light and revealed the vessels. Most people think that Hashem, first thing He did was make light, right? But He didn't have to make light. The story that we're told is that the light was already just there. Just like Hashem is eternal and there forever, the light was right there along with Him. So the first act of creation, right? That's what it says, Breshis bara Elokim. People think first thing Hashem did was do something, but the first thing He did was make Elokim, which is the removal of the light and the appearance of the underlying darkness, which is actually the source of all that light. And the vessels, that's what He first showed to us. So the difference between what was before and what is coming is that we're going to have a union of light and vessel. But the difference is that last time we had the union of light and vessel, i.e. before creation, the vessel never had actually a real part in it. You couldn't see the vessel. Whereas now, when He removes the light and then we rebuild, now all we have is vessels. But we rebuild the vessels in such a way that the light returns. The light this time does not outright nullify the existence of the vessels like it did before. It makes it so the light and the infinite light, the full measure of light, can shine while the vessels are still there. And that's a big chiddush, because now you have mamash the totality of the Eibishter of Hashem, as opposed to what you had before, which was either all light or either all darkness, and there was this duality. So it's very hard for us to understand what that looks like, because we can only understand things in a state of duality. But with the Torah mitzvahs, and we go slowly, what's it all? It's all about building an ark, building a mishkan, building a temple. What are we building over here? We're building all the elements of the world. And where do we get this material for building the mishkan? We took all the gold and silver out of Egypt, which means we refined the darkness of the world, and we reorganized the dark empire into the light empire. We took the same materials, we just put them in the status of Torah mitzvahs, and that's what we have to do in our everyday lives. This is not a armchair philosophy, right? You got to take yourself and put yourself in the structure and the design of Torah mitzvahs down to its most minute detail. Look at the instructions of the Mishkan. It's like mamash. You need architectural education to understand this thing, because it's extremely detailed, and why wouldn't it be? You're talking about making incisions on the very creation itself and knowing exactly where to cut and exactly the dimensions. So this is what all of a religious life is as a Jew. People think that this is like a life of customs and traditions, where it's mamish a scientist. You're going into look at all these books. These books are going into the most minute details of how to build the home of God inside of our daily conduct. Okay, Mishkan is the tabernacle, which is equally as not understood word, but it's the home, the temporary home of God that we built when we were traveling through the desert with Moses. Yeah, until we turned it into the temple. Same principle. All right, let's go on, shall we? No questions at this particular moment. Sorry, but we're going to ask questions after class. We have only 5 minutes left. So we're talking about the Hashmal. And we said, what is the Hashmal? Another name for this parsa, another name for this curtain. Why is it called the Hashmal? What is the Hashmal? So we said it comes from a chitzonius of Bina, the external aspect of Bina. Shemalbi shumakif as yud sfiros de Zah. And the external aspect of Bina, which Bina is above Zah, Zah is Zer Anpin, the spheros that are below Bina. So the external aspect of Bina comes down and wraps itself around the 10 spheros of Zah. Zah being the emotional spectrum. Right? So you have Chochmah, Bina, Zah, and Malchus. From Bina, the external aspect of Bina, it comes down and wraps itself all around Zah, the emotional aspect. And this is called the Hashmal. That's a curtain. V'yud spheres the Nukva. And not only the 10 spheres of Zah, which is basically the Vav of Hashem's name, but also Nukva, also Malchus, the 10 spheres of Malchus, which is the hey, final Hey of Hashem's name. Does anyone need to see that drawn
I
out?
think it's blackboard time.
All right, okay. Just real quick.
Rabbi, if you look behind you, there's an eraser actually.
Is there a pen? Where's that black pen? You know where it is?
On the shelf.
Okay, just cut it. So basically, can you just help me hold this up for a second? Yeah. It's okay. All right, so you have essentially, sorry, let's see, 1 second. The 10 spheros, right? And we're saying that this region is called Zah, Zer Anpin. This region is called Nukva, which is Malchus. And this region is called Chochmah, this region is called Bina. It's basically Yud K Vav K. Okay?
What about the third one?
Das is not in this model exactly. It's sort of like a, we'll talk about that another time. So the idea is like this. Even though you see that there are only 6 spheros here, and there's only 1 sphera here, that's like sort of in a simplistic way of looking at it. But since this represents in general the emotions, right? So really there's 10 spheros of emotion, just like there's 10 spheros of Chochmah. In other words, every region is a whole world. So it has its own 10 spheres. Another way of looking at it is Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, and Asiya, the 4 worlds. So, of course, each 4 world has its own 10 spheros, right? So what he's saying here is that the external aspect of Bina, right, not the inner but the external, it comes down, right, and it wraps itself around the 10 spheros of Zah and Nukva, okay? It basically makes like a little cocoon for these guys, and that's called the Hashmal. Simple as that, right? And we have to find out what that is and why it does that. But there's this sort of ray from Bina which extends itself. So on the one hand, it's Chitzonius. In other words, it's external to Bina. And not only is it external to Bina, it winds up being external to Zah and Nukva as well. It comes and wraps itself around them. It's lower than them, right? It becomes like a vessel for them. But at the same time, obviously, the whole Bina is higher than them. It comes from a higher source, but it wraps itself around and becomes lower. We have to understand this at much more detail. Yeah.
Bina is which?
This is Bina right here.
Chochmah is intelligence, wisdom.
Chochmah is wisdom. Bina is also an aspect of intelligence called understanding.
Understanding.
Yeah.
Lavin.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Same word. Okay, so just as a little visual for the visual learners out there.
Beautiful.
This is inside for a second. We have 2 more minutes. Let's just go another line or two because we dealt with a lot of questions today. So this is Makif as Yud Spheres de Zav, Yud Spheres de Nukva, right? And that's what's called Kasnos, Kisnos, or Kasnos, or, right? Which means that Hashem made garments of skin, so to speak, for Adam and Chava. This is also a reference to this Hashmal. In other words, He wrapped them in an external skin, right? And so this is very similar to what we're dealing with. In other words, it's the idea of basically clothing, right? That wraps itself around the man and the woman. Remember, the man and the woman represents Zah and Malchus, right? The Vav and the Hey in that model. Nukva is Malchus. It means feminine, and the Zah level, which we put, and the Zah level is masculine. So Adam and Chava are basically Zah and Nukva. And Hashem wrapped them. Hashem made their garments, right? Which is Bina above them. He wrapped them in these garments when they had to come out of Gan Eden, right? So we're going to see that these garments are not necessarily bad. They represent this idea of the curtain, right? And like the interface between them and the world of exile that they were going to have to be in. Anyway, we say exile, we mean night, and we already established that there's some good things about night, right? Digestion comes out at night. There's powers that wouldn't be seen when the main light is shining that come out. Dreams, exactly. We said that's like almost like the digestion of the intellect, right? You digest your psychology, and it's the same idea. Umabishim mitzidehem, and it surrounds those two worlds from their sides, as we drew. V'hu bichdei shelo yeh yinikas chitzoniim, and that's so there will not be a suckling from the external negative forces. Here, the same word chitzoniim means evil, basically. External here means like the leeches that Hashem made in creation that are trying to go against Hashem. So we cover them and we surround them with His skin, right? So that they won't be. In other words, what does Rashi say? It's for tznias, right? Why do we cover ourselves and our ladies? Because so the negative forces won't lay their eyes on us, right? In other words, you cover yourself up for tznias. Tznias means modesty. And what's the function of modesty? If anyone asks you, I had this question a bunch of times. I had a few wonderful secular Jews over there, like, what's the deal with all you covering yourselves up? So it's very a Kabbalistic thing, and it's a very obvious thing, right? When you don't cover yourself up, you leave yourself open for, all kinds of strange things that could look at you and touch you and so forth, right? So this is what happens also to the man and the woman, Zah and Malchus. They have to be protected. They have to be covered up, especially when they're about to go into the night. When they got their clothing when they were going to go outside of the garden. When all of a sudden tznias and being negative forces that you had to protect yourself from became relevant. In the Garden of Eden, they could be naked because there was nothing to hide from. There was no other yet, right? But as soon as they go into the realm of the other, they have to protect themselves so they don't leak out delicate parts of themselves to the other that are meant to be with themselves. And not only is it around their bodies, but mitachas ragleihem. And this is more or less primarily what has to do with us. It's also under their feet. And it was apparently He gave them shoes as well. Hu b'chinas min'al. This is the idea of a shoe. In other words, physically, our concept of clothing and our concept of shoes, we always talk about the garments of the soul in a certain sense as being higher than the soul itself. In Tanya, this is a major concept over there, right? And this is exactly what we're discussing right now. That even though these garments are nothing compared to your body, on the other hand, we see that they protect your body, they glorify your body, right? How far are you going to get without shoes? So the idea is that they really come from a higher source, frankly, than the body itself, which is why they're able to give the body something and give hashpah over to the body. And yet, certainly, on one hand, they're lower than the body. They're not flesh and blood. So this is the whole concept. They come from a higher source, but they wind up wrapping themselves in a chitzoniistic way around the lower ones and protect them. So but the way they express themselves is lower, but their source is higher. And this is the Indian of the shoe, which is a very deep thing, actually. Moshe took off his shoes, before he went to Hashem. It's all very, very aligned exactly. Those hefsik ben atzilus lebril v'yitzira. And what is this shoe essentially? Which is essentially the shoe is really the Hashmal. The shoe is the break between the bottom part of one world, the man, versus the lower part of the higher part of the lower world, which is the world that he's going to be standing on. So in other words, Atzilus and Bria is divided by a shoe. Right? Malchus is wearing a shoe. And Bria and Yetzira is divided also by a shoe. There's another shoe over there. Every world, the Malchus has something wrapped around it, just like a human being has something wrapped around us in order to, deal with the outside world. When you're a baby in your mother's womb, you're not dealing with the outside world. You don't have any shoes. You don't have any clothing. You don't need them. Right? Only when you sort of face an other, all of a sudden you need to have this protective wrapping, and this is called the Hashmal.
That's also in the womb. They have the placenta. It's wrapped around.
It's true, but it's not quite the same as the. It's the same. Placenta is the exact same concept, but obviously it's not. It's a more refined level of a encasement. But you're right; they are somewhat of an other, right? But when they're in Gan Eden, it's even less. In other words, there's less and less levels of this vessel. The higher and higher you go, you see the vessel becomes more and more coarse. The further out you come. When you're inside the womb, you still have a vessel, but it's not like a shoe. And higher up, even in the angelic world, you still have a vessel, but it's even less than a placenta. In other words, that's exactly what we were talking about before. The vessels get more and more nullified as the light is more and more revealed. And as the light gets less and less revealed, the vessels become more and more. But we're seeing the vessels really come from a higher place than the light. Right? Even they come out, they're lower. All right, we'll have to hold here. Shkoyach. Well, that's really the secret of creation, isn't it? What's that? It's blocking it, but it's also enabling
To make it in this world.
so you can go somewhere in this